All right, everybody. This is the Hunting Gear Podcast. My name's Dan Johnson. I'm the host. And today I got a returning customer. And what I mean by that is, I don't know. Have you ever been on the Hunting Gear Podcast before?
Yeah, I think that was the last one I was on, actually.
Last one?
Yeah.
How long ago?
I don't remember. January, maybe?
January.
We can do whatever you want, man. I'm
I
good
don't
for
know.
all
Like
of them. I'm
if
good for
that's
all
the
of them.
case, if that's the case, that might be a little too soon to do the Hunting Gear Podcast again. We might
It
have to do
wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long. Okay. Well, I also host the Nine Finger Chronicles podcast. I also host the Western Rookie Pod. Do you do any Western hunting?
I got some great Western Rookie stuff for you, man.
You do?
I do.
All right. Let's do some Western. Okay. Welcome to the Western Rookie Podcast. My name's Dan Johnson, and I'm the host. And today's guest, Mr. Aaron Hepler. Aaron, how you doing, dude?
I'm good, dude. How are you?
I'm doing good. See how that works? I just make it happen.
It's perfect.
You just make it happen.
I'm here for all of them, Dan. I'm here for all of them.
Cool. All right. Where do you live?
I'm in PA, buddy.
Okay, Pennsylvania. What do you do for a living?
I'm a registered nurse in intensive care.
Okay, intensive care. So I knew that,
yep.
But now the people of the Western Rookie Podcast know that.
The people know.
And recently, have you ever been in the intensive care unit and a fight breaks out between family members?
Oh, dude. So working in the intensive care, especially in trauma areas, even in people get really sensitive in the intensive care because emotions are higher. They kind of go with the level of care, right? And that's probably one of the hardest things to deal with as a nurse is the families, because the patient who is unresponsive, sedated on a ventilator doesn't care what's happening, right? They're in la la land. And the families, like, I've had families before where people thought that a spouse was trying to kill another, you know what I mean? Like, and just like all out brawls, like social brawls, like, you know, I can't obviously tell a whole bunch of stories because of like HIPAA and stuff like that. But to the point where you kind of got to like take families out of the room and be like, look, I don't care what your problem is with this person, but you need to take it out there because I'm trying to deal with this person not dying, you know? Yeah. But it's definitely the hardest thing of being a nurse, for sure. Okay. Not the blood, not the big wounds, none of that. The families are definitely the hardest.
Yeah, that's absolutely bananas. And here's why. My wife was in the intensive care unit like the first week in January. I don't know if I told that story on this particular podcast. She had an asthma attack that turned into basically her entire airway constricting shut. And her oxygen levels got down to like in the 70s, which is critical. Like you got to have like everybody has like a 98, 99, what, you know, like 97.
Most healthy people.
Yeah. Right. In that.
As long as you're over 90, you're kind of like on the safe side for a normal person. But most people like you and me that don't smoke and take care of themselves a little bit have higher oxygen levels.
Right. Long story short, my wife's in intensive care. I'm losing my mind because they're telling me like she's going to have to go on a ventilator and she's, we're going to put her in a medically induced coma to try to get this thing settled down. And then you hear the stories about like some people don't come out of those, or all of a sudden their body goes, okay, this is the new normal. And they need a ventilator to stay alive.
Yeah.
Right.
It can happen. Like in your wife's case, if she's having an asthma attack that's as like bad enough to put you on a ventilator, it's really bad because a pulmonologist doesn't want to put somebody on a ventilator that has asthma. They would prefer like a non-invasive, like tight fitting, like a BiPAP mask or something like that. Because once you put somebody on with asthma on a ventilator, it's very difficult to get them off because of the airway constriction. Yeah. And when you take the tube out, they have like re-expansion. They have like vocal cord edema a lot from asthma. So it can make them very difficult to come off. So it can kind of give you an idea if a pulmonologist is telling you we need to intubate for asthma, Like, that's not good, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, in her case, she's like young and she's healthy and probably would be okay. But yeah, sometimes those patients end up getting like vocal cord paralysis and need to have a tracheostomy and a ventilator for a longer term, maybe 3, 6 months until we can kind of wean that out and, you know, take the trach out and stuff like that. But
Yeah. So it scared the shit out of me.
yeah.
What surprises me about this, and I was watching a guy take his final breaths in a different room.
Hmm.
Like my wife, we got in there, things started to settle down. Her levels didn't go up, but they plateaued,
Yeah.
and that was kind of a good thing, right?
Yeah. Very good thing.
And I'm watching this other older guy like take his final hour of life. Like
Hmm.
he's just struggling. You can see his body. Another guy in there is in a coma because he slipped on ice and hit
Yeah.
his head on his steps,
Hmm.
right? And this guy is every tube that you have is in there. People are coming in and out, very emotional,
Hmm.
like crying and stuff. And then I go out into the waiting room. I'm waiting in there to meet the parents, my wife's parents at one
Hmm.
point, and there's people talking shit to each other and arguing in there about like, oh, you did this is your fault, like all this stuff. And I'm just like, at that moment in life, that is the last thing that you need to be doing.
Yeah.
It absolutely blows my mind. Now
Yep.
here's the question that I want to ask you.
Hmm.
um you're a man of faith,
Hmm.
okay? What do you see in critical times like that that may restore it or question it, or like uh just, I don't know. I have my own opinions on stuff like that really do support it. But I'm just kind of curious, like, do all of a sudden people turn to it that maybe never did before? Like, what do you see in that moment?
Faith in the hospital is a really difficult thing sometimes. I see a lot of people who didn't care about God all of a sudden care about God and say, "Oh, God will get them through this." Oh, you know, and but they don't really have the faith. They're just kind of clinging to some kind of hope.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like that never really shakes me because I can kind of tell when people they they don't like it's just something that they're clinging to. It's nothing that's meaningful to them. And as soon as this episode is over, they're back to however they were before. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can be hard to see families kind of like dig into that unless they occasionally you'll see it like truly happen. But for me, I've been an intensive care nurse for 17 years almost. And I've seen a lot of people die. Right. And people are always like, well, how comes you're not sad? And I'm like, well, for me, it would be really difficult to be sad every time somebody died. I'd be
Mm-hmm.
a basket case like at least a few times a week. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But one time, kind of early on in my intensive care career, I can kind of tell this story a little bit. I took care of a gentleman for days, right? And he had a terminal cancer condition, and he started to lose his mind. He kind of um, he would hallucinate and have problems remembering things from the past and things like that. And you know, his wife was really struggling because they had a lot of conversations about what he wanted, like, and he was getting some insane cancer treatments, like top of the line cancer treatments, and they weren't working. And you know, I had a lot of conversations with her over those days, and she decided that, you know, if he would get a whole lot worse, he wouldn't want to be on a ventilator, and she had to support that even though it was hard for her, right? And he wouldn't want CPR and to be resuscitated and to be shocked back to life and that kind of thing. And it was a good decision for him because if he would have had any of that stuff, his prognosis would be gone, right? There wouldn't be one. Like the ultimate end for him is maybe you buy him 3 or 4 days after something like that. And he was transferred out of the ICU. He was doing a little bit better, and he's transferred out of the ICU. And he 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 started struggling to breathe on a different floor, and I went to help take care of him during this event. And I called his wife, and she was like, "Can you just try for, I'm going to be there in 5 minutes. I want to say goodbye." And we were able to keep him alive for a short amount of time. And when she got there, I told her like we would either have to start CPR or she could say goodbye. And I was the only person, and like there's like 30 people in the room, and I was the only person um, that she knew. And she just kept asking me what to do, and it was very sad. So every time I see somebody die, I think of that. But it was kind of strange because I was the nurse carrying the response, like the emergency response beeper that day, and I was the person that had him the most in the
Mhm.
hospital. And for me to be there at that, kind of moment in time was something that really kind of meant a lot to me. To be there for him, and that's kind of who I remember every time somebody I take care of dies. And I know um, his wife has shared this story lots of times, and um, uh, she's done a lot of good things in honor of him and that kind of thing. So, she reached out to me a couple years later to tell me what it was like for her in that moment, and I don't understand why I was there. But actually, and I guess that's not true. I do, because it is part of faith, and it's part of what keeps me kind of grounded, right? You and I talked about the other day about how it can be a struggle um uh to keep your faith when you hear a lot of strange things, like there's a lot more information about the universe and how big it is and
Yeah.
what other things there could be, and those things can rock your faith even if it's fiction.
Mhm.
But you have to kind of, for me, I kind of have to look back at moments in my life where things happen that can't really be explained by science or universe or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, so those are the kinds of things that happen in the hospital regularly, as far as faith goes, that really help to ground my faith and kind of shape the things that I believe in and reinforce what I believe in too.
Yeah, that's crazy. Um, in 17 years, have you ever witnessed what some might call a miracle?
Yeah. And this is going to sound strange to some people. I don't think that I think that miraculous healing is an incredible miracle, and I think that it happens. I think in a hospital setting, a doctor might say it's a miracle, but he doesn't really mean it,
Mhm.
because he'll walk out of the room and be like, "Yeah, we fixed him." But what I really think is the miracle is there are times where I'm taking care of a patient who is going to die and who's like really like on the steps of death, and they might die pretty horribly. Their family members are arguing about why they shouldn't die and why we should keep Uncle Johnny alive or whatever it happens to be. And I find when a family that has a lot of strife can find some peace in the end and then help Uncle Johnny be comfortable and help Uncle Johnny die with dignity, to me, that's way more of a miracle,
Mhm.
because I've seen people die pretty horribly because their family wouldn't allow it, because
Mhm.
they couldn't find the teamwork and connection to support each other to do that. And it's
Yeah.
actually more of a miracle because you're gonna die. Like, we're all gonna die, and there's no way around that.
Yeah.
There's no pill to keep you alive forever. And kind of like how people die, it can be really brutal.
Yeah.
And when I see family members be able to make that person's last miracle, that to me is more of a miracle than um, somebody stepping up out of the bed and walking.
Yeah.
Not that that wouldn't be. I think that's incredible too. Um, but those are the things that kind of hurt more, and they stay with you more when you see somebody die, and it's like you couldn't do anything about helping them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. How old, like, so 17 years ago, like, and I know we're not talking about anything at this point. This might not even turn into a Western Rookie podcast. You know what
You
I mean?
can cut it. You can do whatever you want with it, man.
My question to you though is like, what was it like to witness, to be there the very first time someone died as a professional? Do you remember that moment?
Um, I don't, but I honestly, I could remember what the feeling was like. I don't remember who it was or
Yeah.
how it happened. I think some of those memories either get repressed or you just kind of, it happens so many times you kind of forget it all. It's not like
Yeah.
it's a little different, but I do remember that as a new nurse, you're just so worried about getting your work done. And I think that's kind of a protective thing. Like, okay, now I got to like take all the things out and put them in a bag and I got to make sure they got the labels on so nobody gets them confused with this
Hmm.
patient and that patient, you know. So I think that's kind of like a protective thing for new nurses. Like innately it's a good thing cuz they're just so worried about getting the tasks done that you kind of, not that
Yeah.
you're not there for the family or whatever in the moment, but you're kind of like, once the person dies, it kind of becomes like, not to be desensitized, but it becomes almost inhuman. You're kind of just like doing the
Yeah.
things that you need to do.
Yeah. That blows my mind because, um, I've talked to other emergency room doctors and nurses and people who are involved really with the worst time of people's lives, right? And they they go through horrible things. Like I can remember a buddy of mine who was a ER doctor for a while, and he was telling me like, if it's not like a horrible accident or gunshot wound or something like that where it's physical, it's it's also like mental illness. A lot of people come into the emergency room who are mentally ill. Maybe there's not necessarily anything physically wrong with them, but it's mental.
Hmm.
Or like, he goes, this is going to sound maybe insensitive, but he's like, there was a month there where all I did was pull stuff out of people's asses.
That happens.
Yeah, like candlesticks
Yeah.
and toys and like just stuff. Like
Yep.
one guy used to tell me a story about an Axe body spray can
Yeah.
was put in a dude's butt. And
Yep.
he's like, I that's all I did. And so what the point of those comments there is that how hard is it for you to go home and be a dad slash husband after a full day of that or a full 24-hour shift or whatever it is that you do?
Well, actually, it's not because my wife is a nurse too. So,
Okay. So you
so
guys
that,
get to talk it out a little bit?
yeah. Now she's not currently practicing. She's an administrator at our daughter's school now. But she still holds a nursing license, and she just left the field like a year ago, and it was more for like childcare reasons
Hmm.
and for getting hours and that type of thing. But it's kind of easy because I can come home and she's like, "Oh, how was your day?" And when I said, "Well, this and this and this had happened," and she's like, "Oh, that sucks," you know, like
Yeah.
because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Um, she was she was in like the critical care division. She worked in intermediate care with cardiac patients and stuff. So she understands like most of what I do throughout a day. And if there's not something that she knows about, it's pretty easy to kind of tell her what that is. You know what I mean? And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, geez, you know. And she's kind of seen it all too. She was a nurse for, I think, 9 years before she started this job. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's kind of like, it's actually kind of easy. And actually, our hospital puts on something pretty cool. They did like a bring your kid to work day type thing. And my daughter, um, came to that this year and she was just like now she's visited me in the intensive care a lot, like ever since she was little, because we used to live like 5 minutes from the hospital
Hmm.
and she would come and see me at work, and then COVID happened, obviously, and she couldn't come to see me as much. And you know, they did this bring your kid to work day and she thought it was so cool, like, oh, the radiology thing is really cool. And you know, after it was done, they did certain things with her, and one of my buddies was like, well, why don't you bring her down to the trauma bay and we can show her the stuff that we, do down there. Unfortunately, like there was no patients down there at the time. So
Mhm.
we took her down and he like ultrasounded her arm and showed her the veins and the arteries and showed her all the equipment that we have down there. And she was like, now she wants to be a trauma nurse. And I'm like,
You
don't,
didn't
don't do
you
it. But
you didn't get a full range of that experience, right? You
yeah,
know?
yeah. But I'm like, she thought it was awesome and she came home and she told all her friends like how cool it was and she could see the arteries, and I,
Yeah,
I, I thought that was kind of neat. But yeah, it's just I don't know if I forget what kind of question you asked there, but yeah, it's kind of like as far as like kids go, like yeah, she kind of like gets what mom and dad does a little bit. So
right.
it's
Do you
kind of
hold
cool.
do you hold your kids a little bit tighter after a day when there's a lot of death in the room?
Yeah, like I said, I really try to kind of just it's going to make me sound very desensitized, but I kind of objectify it and try to like be there for the families and answer the questions that they need. And then like, not like this can't happen to my family type thing, but like mentally in that kind of scenario, you really have to protect yourself for your family. You kind of have to protect your mind for your family. So I usually take care of that while I'm at work. Like if there's something that really upset me about a situation, I'm talking to about it with one of the physicians. But the nice thing about medicine and when somebody dies, either they've been dying for a long time and like it's coming to a close. And like I said, usually you feel like you've done something good for somebody if you can provide them with dignity and comfort in the end.
Yeah,
Or somebody dies very tragically and you're like, there is absolutely nothing we could have done to fix that.
yeah,
Like, if somebody comes in with esophageal varices, which is like basically dilated arteries in your esophagus, and oftentimes that happens to uh, to alcoholics. They'll get like these varices in their throat, and they can pop and bleed. Sometimes they can put a clip on them, but if it ruptures and it's massive, it can be pretty bad. And I've been to a lot of those where it's like there's just blood all over the place, and I'm like, probably not going to save that person,
yeah,
or they throw like a massive clot in their lung or something like that. And it's like, you kind of do what you can, but like there's not really anything you can do to help with that. So,
yeah, yeah. I don't know if I would be built for something like that. Um, I don't know. Like, I don't think let's say let's say I'm with a buddy and we're
hmm
on a hunting trip and he falls and his femur's sticking out of his leg. I think I'm going to have enough gusto in my body to solve that problem right then and there like I would need to.
hmm
But but that's because the adrenaline would be pumping. I need to do this as opposed to this is my job where I'm just waiting for something to come in the door,
hmm
right? And that's my job for the day. And then sitting there and and maybe it would be something that I would struggle with initially, but then again get desensitized to it over
hmm
the course of X number of years.
hmm
Maybe I could do it,
hmm
but I don't know. Like I get, it's weird. I get emotionally attached to things
hmm
fairly easy,
hmm
right? Whether it's a friendship or, obviously my own kids, but even for a short period of time, I feel like I would be horrible at a guy coming in who's maybe got the cancer and you can get to know him a little bit and you have this personal connection and how many kids you got, oh, and you start sharing those with those and you find out maybe this guy's a really good person. He's
hmm
like good into like he's respected by his community
hmm
and just he had a bad draw in life.
hmm
And that then would that might that might weigh on me over the years. But I don't know. I've never been in that situation.
Yeah, like I said, I think early on it probably does. And then, I mean, when you go to nursing school, like, people are going to die that you take care of, but
Mhm.
you're like, I'm going to be a lifesaver and all this kind of stuff. And But then you like learn how to put people on bedpans and wipe people's butt and like, like it's kind of like a lot of tasky stuff. And
Yeah.
you're given medications and you learn about all the class and action of all these medicines that you're giving and all the
Yeah.
procedures that you can do as a nurse or all the equipment that you've got to take care of. That's more of what your day is
Yeah.
um, than
Than what the TV show makes it sound like.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you get like you get some of the gruesome stuff, like when a trauma patient comes upstairs, a gunshot wound, and you're like suturing things and plugging holes and giving a whole bunch of blood and all that kind of stuff, and uh, that happens, but it's usually kind of like a couple of hours, and then it's like days of just either trying to keep them alive or just getting them more medically stable until we
Mhm.
can take them off the ventilator and wake them up, and they're usually very cranky, and you know what I mean, like that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um, and it's not every day that somebody dies. There's like kind of waves. Like
Yeah.
I remember when I came back from I had like a paternity leave when we had our daughter, and I had like 8 patients in a row die. I was like, "Ugh," like
Damn.
something's but I haven't had a patient now. I haven't had one that died for a couple of months now, maybe 2 months or something.
Yeah.
So you kind of like go through phases and yeah, you can get attached. And I think that's one good thing about like, I only work 3 days a week. I do 3 12-hour shifts
Yeah.
and it's full-time pay, full-time benefits, all that good stuff, whatever. That's why I always tell people like young people, if you want a job that like you can make a pretty decent living and you can get a lot of time to go hunting and fishing, like nursing's kind of good for that. But if you want to be a little less involved, and if anybody's listening to this that's in radiology, they probably won't like it, but you should be a radiology tech because they're going to like take the picture and send the patient back to wherever.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very busy. They do a lot of work and they do a lot of good work. It's just they don't own a patient. They don't have to take care of them all day long and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying like a radiology tech takes the pictures, works the same shift that you do, and so that's another opportunity to have like a somebody uh, who wants to do a lot of hunting can do that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So there you
Radiology.
go. We have a takeaway. We have an outdoor takeaway right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Radiology tech, respiratory therapist, or nursing is kind of like very shift work. And there's a lot of opportunity for like 10 12 hour shifts, work 3 4 days a week, especially in a hospital setting. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I like it. I like it. All right. With your time off, all right. Well, I don't know where I'm going with this episode. I don't even know what platform I'm gonna launch it on. So
I
I am,
mean, honestly, man, if this needs to just be a you and me conversation because you're interested, we can circle back to Western Rookie and start all over again.
yeah. I mean, I
Good
think
with it.
what we do is we just say at this point, we go, that was a good conversation,
Yeah.
right? Now we get to talk about this.
Yeah.
If you liked it, you liked it. If not, hey, I don't give a shit. Like
Yeah.
who cares, right? So I'm gonna do some commercials real quick before
Yep.
we get into the rest of the conversation. But if you're looking for one of the best optics in the game, you need to go check out Vortex Optics. These guys have a variety, and when I mean variety of sizes and magnifications and price points for spotting scopes, range finders, red dots, rifle scopes, binoculars. They have a big ass apparel line that is awesome as well. It is velvet season here in Iowa, and that means that me and my boys are driving around trying to glass up velvet deer in the bean fields, and we bring a spotting scope and a couple sets of binoculars. Actually, this would be a good gift for a nephew or a kid, niece that likes or your children that likes to do that kind of stuff. Buy them a pair of the youth binoculars from Vortex, dude. Awesome, they're badass. Actually, I last year I brought one of them into the stand with me as like a just because it was a real tight, like a real tight tree stand setup where it was like
Mm-hmm.
real close, real thick. You couldn't see too far in there. I brought that. But anyway, vortexoptics.com. Go check it out. Next on the list is Wasp. Wasp Archery. These guys have a full lineup of fixed and mechanical broadheads. Most of their heads are still manufactured in the United States. And I choose Wasp for one reason, because when that broadhead goes through that animal, it makes a ton of does a ton of damage, and they would need an intensive care nurse like Aaron here to help them. But there's no intensive care nurses out in the world, out in the real the wild woods, I guess you
Yeah.
would say. So go check out wasparchery.com. I do have a discount code NFC20 for 20% off. Next on the list is Montana Decoy. And if you're looking for something that may help you get in the kill zone, in the bubble on some of these Western hunts like antelope or mule deer or elk, go check out montanadecoy.com. All right, Aaron, this is where we hard pivot, and
Hard pivot.
we hard pivot into Western hunting. What's
Yeah.
your experience with Western hunting?
So, um, I'll tell you where it first started. So
Okay.
you kind of know my friendship with Tony a little bit, like kind of how I met him and that kind of thing with Tony
Tony
Peterson.
Tony Peterson. Okay.
Yeah. And early on, I'm like, you told me all this stuff, and I feel, it kind of like inspired me to go check out these places. I'm going to go elk hunting next year. And he was like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why not? He's like, elk hunting is really hard. And if you've never Western hunted and you just want a good experience, you should try something else like an antelope, you
Yeah.
know? And he wasn't wrong. So I was like, oh, okay. So I'm gonna collect antelope points. So I started collecting antelope points and did some like small hunts. I went to Ohio or whatever, had a good hunt. Talked to Tony on his old podcast about that and whatever. And uh, you know, you have to get a lot of antelope points to really like get a pretty good unit. And I have not very hard pivot. I have a pulmonologist that I work with who loves to elk hunt, right?
Okay.
And he's like, you gotta go. And he either goes for moose or for elk every year. And usually it's like a guided, like fully guided or
Mhm.
whatever. And he's like, he's old, right? If he's listening to this, he's not that old. He's like, and he's in his mid 60s.
Yeah.
And I think he was 63 when we went elk hunting together. But he's like, you got to try this. And one day I really would like to do some type of public land hunt, but I don't have I can't take off the kind of time to go on like a real, like, let's go find them. And when we find them, we can stay for 2 more weeks kind of hunt.
Right. Right.
So he's like, would you feel about like a drop camp that's public land? And, I'm like, well, I haven't even been out west yet. This was in 22. Well, we started planning like in 2020, I think. And he's like, yeah, we can go. I found this drop camp outfitter. I have an agent that I work with all the time. He says it's a really good public land hunt. We should check it out. It's in Colorado. He's like, it's 7 days. I was like, that sounds kind of cool. Like,
Mhm.
kind of get like an edge up on the learning curve. Cause that's one thing that Tony said is like, if you're just going out like over the counter, find them yourself, like you're going to kind of struggle until you learn how to find them.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this could kind of like cut that edge a little bit. So we started planning, bought our point, did all the things the outfitters tell you to do. And we had planned this with 4 guys at the time. This was like a $10,000 hunt that was split 4 ways, pretty budget friendly, um, for a little bit extra, like a better chance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is pretty good. So I really like dug into the training thing, learned about what was important to acclimate to altitude because we were going to be hunting pretty high and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where my experience for Western hunting went. And we can kind of talk, kind of build this around that
Mhm.
story because it was a really great hunt. It was a lot of fun. And I learned a lot on one hunt because I did things a little bit different than just go out there and figure it out.
Okay. So it sounds like to me you put a lot of effort into the prep work and gaining the knowledge base before actually going on the hunt. And
Hmm.
you you feel that all that extra work helped you have a better experience while you were there, because all that work that you did plus the boots on the ground, it
Hmm.
like maybe it didn't flatten the curve, but
Mhm.
it made that mountain feel a little bit more climbable.
Oh, for sure. You know, the other thing that was helpful was bringing somebody that had experience, because there was
Yeah.
like, again, we went with four friends. It was two. It was a nurse practitioner that I work with, a physician's assistant that they both work for cardiothoracic surgery, and with this pulmonologist that I know, and we all love to bow hunt. And the two, the nurse practitioner and the physician's assistant, I already hunt with them all the time. Like, we're
Yeah.
hunting buddies, we bow hunt together, shoot together, go fishing together. The pulmonologist was a friend that I worked with that we talked hunting all the time, never got to hunt with, right?
Yeah.
And he was the experienced one. Like, he had shot a handful of elk in like New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona. He had killed a few, killed a nice bull moose in Alaska, all that kind of stuff. So he kind of had like an idea of what you're supposed to do, because he's learned from guides, right?
Mhm.
And he's learned how to find elk and stick with elk and that kind of thing. And um, so yeah, learning about the animal prior to going, because again, I never got to go on that antelope hunt. I'm still
Right.
collecting antelope points for where I want to go,
Yeah.
in Wyoming. But this was a really good opportunity. And the cool thing is about the effort that you put in. So again, drop camp, pretty good idea, right? Like, I don't have to bring quite as much gear. I can take that off my back. We rode in on horses, right? These guides bring you in, like, I think we were in like 7 or 8 miles on horses to an area they already knew had elk. They don't tell you like, hunt this spot and the elk will be over here. They kind of like, yeah, we've had guys shoot them over here. We've had them shoot them over here. But pretty much what they do is like, there's elk anywhere from 1 to 3 miles away from camp. That's probably your hot spot. When you get outside that, you'll still find them, but this is the hot area. We put you in them. Go find them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they horse you in there, and learning what I wanted to eat. That was the other thing that's really important to acclimating to altitude. So kind of like acquiring the things that you need to, the right amount of calories. Altitude is kind of something that scared me a lot, because I was like, because I work in intensive care and because I know pulmonologists, they're like, oh, when I was in medical school, I've met somebody that had altitude sickness from going skiing, and they were on oxygen for 10 years after that, all that kind of stuff. And, um, and I was going to be with a gentleman that was in his 60s and like, in pretty good shape, he did
Yeah.
his thing, but, um, those are kind of things like you learn. And then I was like, well, none of these guys know how to call really. Like, we got to learn how to like bugle a little bit, and, learning that kind of thing. Was also kind of like, you're learning this for one hunt, and then I might not go back there for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so that was kind of like something I needed to learn. But yeah, and then kind of uh people compare elk to turkeys a lot. They're because they're vocal.
Yeah.
But they're not turkeys and they're not deer. Um, they're just very different, compared to the animals that you're hunting. So really learning, digging into the nuances of what they like to do and how they like to move is different. So those are things that were really important to learn before I went. But the planning of a hunt is kind of crazy, because, like, okay, so one guy's going to fly because he doesn't have time. The rest of us, we're going to drive, and we're going to drive my truck, right? And we decided we were going to drive straight through. So we started at like 8 p.m. at night, and we get into, Colorado's 2 hours behind, but it takes 24 hours to drive there. So we get there at like 6 p.m. the next day, and we're all like whopped. Okay,
Yeah.
let's get some food. We're going to the hotel stay, and then we're gonna go to the trailhead the next morning. It doesn't give you a lot of time to acclimate. You're at 5,000 feet when you start. You drive to 7, and then you park at the trailhead at 10, and you realize like that's a big difference with your
Mhm.
breathing. You're like laying in a sleeping bag and rolling over, and like, ooh, that feels weird.
Yeah.
Now I took Diamox to acclimate to the altitude. Um, The other guys started taking it on our way out, because it is a diuretic, so they didn't want to be peeing the whole time in the truck,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
it kind of like gives you a little bit of gut wrench when you start it, like the first couple doses, and
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, I don't feel good. I'm not taking this anymore." And they ended up being fine. They didn't take it then, and they ended up being fine. But I could say it helped, but it changes the taste of some food a
Yeah.
little bit. So that might be something you consider, like, um,
I
you know,
did.
those,
I
yeah,
took that the not my first elk hunt, but my second, third, and fourth elk hunt that I went on. I took that
I think
for
it's
sure.
worth it.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt anything, but it does, you kind of got to keep in mind, it does kind of change the taste of some things that you eat and make it,
Yeah.
and you already don't really have much of an appetite, but you have to eat.
Yeah.
Um, I ate a lot of Peak Refuel while I was there because they're like very calorie dense, and some of them are a little much. But
Yeah.
uh, like man, I don't think I could take another bite. But they do help keep the calories up and your
Hmm.
sodium levels and that kind of thing. And drinking a lot of water before you go. You don't want to be drinking like, okay, yeah, I can drink a lot of water and get there and be drinking 10 liters of water a day when your body's not acclimated to that, because you'll drop your sodium level really low and then you'll feel real terrible.
Right.
That's what free water does. It lowers your sodium level too much. So those are kind of important things to think about. Maybe like a little on the weird technical side or whatever. But those honey stinger waffles,
Oh yeah.
I love those things, right? But when you get to altitude and the package blows up, they get like mildly stale. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
And then they don't taste very good when you're on Diamox so much. And so you got to think about some of those things that you might like. You might end up having to choke them down because you aren't going to like them
Yeah.
in a different setting like that. Um, but we're like, oh, before we went, I was like, well, how are we going to get this meat home? Because the outfitter wants us to use this processor, and I want to process the elk on my own. I always do all my own. I
Hmm.
pack out my deer. I do everything on my own. And I'm like, I don't want anybody touching my elk. Like, I want to do it. And like, how am I gonna? So they'll take the head to this taxidermist, and they'll take the meat to this thing, and we're like, well, how do we do this? And they said we had to use the processor and that they wouldn't do it any other way. And I was like, eh. I called the processor and I'm like, listen, I'm coming elk hunting. I don't want anybody to do anything with this, but can you freeze the meat for me if I can you flash freeze it and just keep it until if we
Yeah.
kill, and they were like, yeah, $70 for a week. And I was like, okay, sounds
Done.
good,
Yeah.
you know? And the outfitter tries to argue because they probably get some kind of commission or something. But that's kind of stuff you have to like put in line before you go. Because after I got to that processor, I was like, thank goodness I did not let them touch this in any way, because it was kind of deplorable.
Yeah.
And you don't know that. You don't like go tour this stuff when you get there.
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, how are you going to get this home? Because I got everybody's gear in my truck, three dudes. And on the way, like, what are we going to do on the way home? And I'm like, oh, we'll just find, like, I Googled some U-Haul things and I'm like, well, there's probably like a U-Haul we can pick up, right? Fast forward. Well, we can talk about that later, but those are kinds of things that you need to have in place, because
Yeah.
like you can do the thing was like, oh, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But that bridge could cost you like
$1,000. Yeah.
$1,000,
Yeah.
or you could come home. And if I didn't have the brains blown out from a skull from a taxidermist or something, you could have your trophy removed, or you could lose all that meat because nobody flash froze it for you and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are kinds of things that you want to think about beforehand, that you're so worried about learning about the animal and working out and the fitness and shooting your bow 80 yards and all this stuff. And a lot of like that stuff all matters, but also the fine details of the traveling part matter a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So on that particular hunt, I mean, that just sounds like a fun adventure where you're on horses. You're like
Hmm.
that. When people think of a cinematic adventure for an elk hunt, getting on a horses and going into some wall tent deep into the backcountry just is what it feels like to me. Anyway, um, I know that that's not what all elk hunting is like. But when you were telling that story, I'm just like, dude, I can just imagine being on a horse with my gear and my bow and just getting backpacked in. Once you got to that camp, were the elk there, like the guy said, or did you have to work for it?
So we got to the trailhead the night before the hunt, and we were going to
Yep.
stay in a tent and, acclimate, which
Hmm.
is not a thing in the first couple days, And just at the trailhead, we could hear elk all night long, like
Oh, nice.
just, you know, all night. And, there was a lot of crap. I'm like, this is probably a pretty good area. And it was funny because when we got to the trailhead, there was a trailer and like 3 horses. And we're like, oh, what's going on here? And next thing you know, the guides are riding out in horses and they're like, who the hell are you? Like all pissed off. And they're
Hmm.
like, are you so and so? And they're like, yeah, what are you doing here? And we're like, oh, well, we're here to meet you tomorrow. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, okay, no big
Oh,
deal. Like, you're going to stay here tonight? Like, oh, okay. Like, we had our little pop up tents and we were shooting our bows on the road and stuff.
yep.
And so they came in the next morning and it's kind of like cowboy stuff, right?
Hmm.
Like the guide has a bunch of ranch hands hired to basically bring a whole bunch of horses and pack you and all your stuff in.
Yeah.
You each allowed a backpack, a cooler, and your bow, you know, and, they load up some mules, load up some horses. And I am not a horse fan. Like, I like horses. I
Do
think they're
you get
pretty.
nervous riding one?
I am terrified to ride a horse, right? And now, the pulmonologist, the intensivist that we were with, he's tall, right? He's like 6'2" and whatever. And they're like, well, he's the biggest guy, so he can go on this horse. And they give him the biggest horse. They ended up giving me, like, maybe not the smallest horse, but close to the smallest horse. And I'm
Like a
like,
mini horse?
yeah, it wasn't a mini, it was a pony, like a
Yeah.
church pony. And they said, these horses are all gentle. They're from a church camp. It's fine. And I'm like, and these are kind of like tough ranchers.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you do realize I weigh like 40 more pounds than any of these guys here, right? Like, they're all like, I think the intensivist is like, I'm 180. And I'm like, oh, I'm like 225 right now, and he's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, we get on these horses and my horse decides it's having its own mind. It walks
Yep.
down to the creek, puts its head down. I think I'm falling into water. And it puts its head up. It takes a look around and it just starts going up the trail. And the
Yeah.
guides are like, wait, get back here. Where are you going? I'm like, they're bringing this horse back here. I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's just
I don't
going.
know the controls on
And
this
I'm
thing,
like
buddy.
pulling. I'm like, let's go. And he's like,
Aha!
Now, my buddy Seth, we talk about this all the time. He was riding behind me for a while, and this horse was trying to knock me off on every single tree that we passed. Like, they're like, if it gets near a tree, just push the tree. It'll veer the horse off.
Yeah.
Dude, every single tree, it brought me under every single branch that was low, like everything. And it would like stop to take a crap and then realize that the other horses would be like 100 yards in front, and then he would just run up this just rocky trail. I'm like, ah! I'm like, had a rough time right now. And they're just like laughing because I'm like, I'm going to die. Like, this
Yeah.
horse is trying. And he's like, dude, your horse hates you. And I'm like, that's because I weigh more than it should.
Yeah.
And so we get out to the camp and they have a wall tent set up out there and like a gravity filter and show you where the water's at. And like, they have a couple coolers that are bear proof that you could put stuff in if you wanted to.
Hmm.
There are bears in the area, but they said, after burns and stuff, they weren't super prevalent. But kind of like explore camp, and it's like, it is Western, right? Because it's
Hmm.
burned. And actually, the logo for my podcast is the wall tent that we stayed in and the burn that it was in.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Awesome.
cool. And kind of explore camp a little bit, and there's like arrowheads laying around and pieces of Indian pottery and like
Oh,
all
really?
these artifacts around our camp, right? It's really cool.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, and you're like, kind of cool, kind of spooky,
Yeah.
like, but we wake up we hunted that evening. I don't remember if we heard elk or not, but we hunted pretty close to camp because it was like, pretty late in the afternoon that we finally got set up or whatever. And like I said, on the way out, they're like showing us like that's a glacier over there, and that peak over there is 14,000 feet. We were camped at 10, and usually we're glassing from like 11. And you know, there because of the burns, they said the elk population was a little bit lower because they weren't quite in that area as much,
Mhm.
but there was pretty good amount of elk, right?
Yeah.
Um, I didn't see elk every day, but we heard them every day and got fairly close to them every day. And there was this, I think on the first morning we heard what I would assume is a herd bull, because you could see on Onyx there was like a meadow pretty far down, and he would like you could hear him like come up the edge of it and go back down around, like he's just kind of keeping these cows corralled.
Mhm.
And they said there was a bull that was like 370s in there somewhere. And I would assume that would be him, because he would go all the way out to the other saddle and kind of go on this other point. And we kept, we're like, oh, maybe tomorrow we'll cut that one off or whatever, and try to get into him. And we're working along we're working along this ridge and just kind of like essentially scouting, right?
Mhm.
We're like bugling, trying to pick up where elk are staging, that kind of thing. And we get to this area where it looks like there was a big brawl. Like all the dirt and leaves were just like all over the place, and like just there were trees knocked out, like little things knocked over and stuff. And like, oh, it's kind of cool. You hit the bugle, nothing. Kind of move along. There's a wallow, and it looked like it hadn't been touched that morning, but maybe tracks from the day before. There was a little thin crust of ice, and it was kind of broken around the edges,
Mhm.
but iced back over. So they had probably used it the day before or whatever. And this was end of September, which is kind of another thing. It's after that muzzleloader season, so they're still bugling, but it's not like the rut, you know?
Right.
And while we're standing at the swallow, I hit a bugle, and just a little comes back. And I'm like, oh, like we're like, oh, that was pretty close. And we get on Onyx and look, there's this opening down the hill. It's like an oval, an oval, just kind of like up the elevation. And I'm like, well, throw some milkweed, thermals are going up. I'm like, okay. So what we're gonna do is Dr. Stelmach, he's gonna go to the top of this oval. And I'm gonna try to sneak down around. And I'm like, don't you think that it sounded so close? This opening's only like 80 to 100 yards away. I'm like, don't you think he's in there? He sounded really close. And he's like, I think he's further than you think. I'm like, okay. And we kind of like, well, this
Was
is
a
what we're gonna
guide
do.
with you at this point?
No, the
No.
guides leave. Once they
Okay.
drop you off at camp, they're like, have fun, call us when you get one, you
Gotcha.
know?
Yep.
And I was using like a Zaleo device, so that's how we kind of communicated. Some of the guys had InReach. I had the Zaleo, and it actually worked pretty fantastically for communicating back home, comparatively. But anyway, I was like, well, we're gonna get Stelmach this bull. I'm gonna drop down, call, and that elk's gonna come up the thermal. Like typical,
Mhm.
like the elk will come up above the thermals, try to win me, and he'll shoot it. So we get all set up, and I put my pack down, set my bow in my pack, grab the bugle. And I'm like, I'll see where this thing's at. I bugle, and he cuts me off, and he's like, I'm like, oh, he's coming. Like this bull's coming.
Mhm.
I like grab my bow, I quick knock an arrow, and next thing you know, I like look up, and there's two bulls running down the like across from this meadow. There's like a little like uphill to a point, and there's two bulls just running down through the woods that are going to hit this meadow any second. And I'm like, oh shoot, and I like kind of get next to a tree, and uh now they hit the meadow. They're like 60 yards, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I draw my bow, and they're like too much stuff in the way, like it's a meadow, but there's like trees in it and like
Mhm.
downfall or whatever, deadfall. I draw my bow, and I'm like, where I finally get to the point, I'm like, this elk is going to be, I practiced, we all practice 100 yards, 70 yards, 80
Mhm.
yards, 100 yards to shoot these elk. And I'm like, I'm going to kill this elk at 20 yards, because
Yeah.
that's the only place I'm going to be able to shoot him. And then he gets the hair up on his back, and does the stiff leg thing where he's kind of like, and I'm like, he knows something's not right,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, I'm going to have to take a frontal shot, and because he's coming straight at me.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like settled the pin, and I was like just altitude hiking. Like it's like, it's 10 o'clock, or I think it was 8:30 in the morning actually, and it was already like 80 degrees, and it
Mhm.
was like humid. And I'm like, all right. And I hit that release, and he just falls over. And I'm like, holy crap. And he's like, I hit him, through the right hole, but he was just uphill enough that the trajectory of the arrow went through some arteries and probably his aorta, I guess, and hit him in the middle of the spine, like mid back.
Yeah.
And he just like over, and dude, the massive amount of strength that those animals have is wild. There was a 22-inch tree laying next to him, and he was picking it up with his antlers, just like, you know,
Yeah.
and, I made some finishing shots or whatever, because the first one I took, he was wiggling his head around so much. I hit him, the antlers just like knocked my arrow clean out of the way. And then I shot him through the lungs, and he expired.
Wait a second. You were close enough to where on the second shot, his antlers knocked your arrow off?
He like, he was wiggling. He was like, because when you spine a deer and they do the thing where
Yeah.
he was thrashing his head around so much. And I was like maybe 5 or 6 yards trying to like put an arrow into his lungs. And he like just dink, and the arrow just flew into outer space. Like,
Holy shit.
yeah, it was, it was pretty wild. But the doctor runs down the hill. He's like, and I never heard it curse. And he's like, holy shit,
Yeah.
holy shit. Yeah. And then he's like, wait, be quiet, be cool. Because the other one turned around to come back.
Yeah.
And he was going to try it. We were going to try a double, and it didn't happen. But they were both 6x6 bulls. And I couldn't believe it. It was like the first morning, and like it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
So I'm so so this is where we get into the things that you should know as a Western rookie. You set
Mhm.
up your first aid kit, and you're worried about like breaking your leg or lots of bleeding. So you bring like quick clot, and because I have physician's assistants that I'm friends with, we bring sutures
Mhm.
and um staples and things like that, tourniquets, things that you think you might need to be helicoptered out for, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we get down, and I'm like, I gotta fill out my tag, and I'm going to cut the triangles out of the tag or whatever. And I'm like, my sunglasses are on. I'm like, I can't see it. They're all fogged up. And I like put my sunglasses up, and I'm like, the tag's still blurry. I'm like, what the hell? And I like look at him, and I close one eye. Oh, that one's okay. And I close my other eye, which my right eye is my shooting eye, and I can't see him. Like all I can see is like an outline of a person there. Well, I must have got like a sty in my eye. I don't Probably in a hotel or something. And it scratched my cornea, and I couldn't really see out of my eye. I don't know how I made the shot. I must have had both eyes open. And no, I can't see you. And he's like, what? I'm like, my right eye is like all I see, like a gray shadow and like a big halo of light, and that's it. And oh, he's like, well, let's get this thing taken care of, and then we'll try to figure out what's up at camp. I didn't bring any eye drops, dude. Like no, like just refresh tears or whatever.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, he had like contact solution that I was using all week, but um, that's like something you don't really think of. You know what I mean? Like now, so I literally walked around all week, and I'm like, I might go blind. Like this eye might be shot. I don't know. And fortunately, it like started coming back on Friday where it wasn't so bad. But I walked around all week then, kind of like a little unbalanced. And fortunately, I was with him,
So
and
you got a scratch on your eyeball is
yeah,
what initially it was.
yeah,
And
that's
that
it.
was from hiking around up there?
No,
Or
I don't. I got like a sty, like it's like a little like pimple on the underside of your eyelid. You know what I
okay.
mean? and it must have been irritating enough that it scratched my cornea, or I got something in my eye that I like grit or sand or something.
Yeah.
The guide, he called the guide. We had a satellite phone too, so we could call or whatever. And the doctor called the guide and was like, we'll have to see what's happening. He might have to come down. And he's like, drink a lot of water. He's like, he's got altitude sickness. And I'm like, I don't have a headache. I don't got anything else. Like
Hmm.
just my eye. And like I said, sometimes it would be better, but he's like, the doctor I was with looked in it and he's like, it is so irritated. Like you can see all the blood vessels in your eye are like dilated and
Hmm.
whatever. And it's really swollen. So he's like, I think it'll be fine. We just need to keep it hydrated. And it ended up being fine. Like
Yeah.
I had corrective surgery a long time ago. That was my nursing treat to myself when I graduated school. I had eye surgery and I have 20/20 vision still. I had that in
Good.
2011. But thankfully, like that, nothing bad happened from that, but it did make it did make hiking like hard. When you're
Hmm.
walking over rocks, and your eyes aren't equal, you're kind of like a little unbalanced, so that
Yeah.
it made it hard to go fast a long distance.
Yeah.
But dude, like what an experience. Like um, my buddies were like 2 miles away and we text them and they ended up coming out, getting to us by the time we were almost done, like quartering and stuff. And, I didn't get to, the thing that I wish I could have seen was saw the ranchers pick this thing up. Um, but we sent them waypoints and they ended up coming in and I was there waiting on a hill near the trail to try to catch them.
Hmm.
And they must have just came right below a rise and then came up to the elk instead. And I didn't get to see them put it on the horses and pack it out. Cause I was sitting there waiting for them to
Hmm.
see them come through and, I missed them. So, um, that was kind of a bummer, but yeah, they picked the elk up and brought it out, brought my meat to a processor. And that's what I'm saying is like, they flash froze the meat for me because I called them in advance and said, I need you to do this. And they were like,
Hmm.
yeah, that sounds good. Cause you let us know in advance. That's fine. And, they brought the head to a taxidermist and I said, I just want the brains blown out. I'm just having a euro done.
Hmm.
I don't have enough room in my house for a, for
A full elk
a
mount.
full
Yeah.
elk mount. Besides, those skulls, man, are so impressive. Like
They're big.
they're big and it's really
Yeah.
cool. But it ended up being, I learned a lot about elk after the fact because all I did all week was call, you
Yeah.
know?
You sat back and let the other guys move in.
hmm
Yeah.
And the other two guys, my buddies that were hunting, they hunted together all week really, and they had some close calls and real encounters with that one real big herd bull, I would assume. And we were on smaller bulls most of the week and cows, and we did end up finding a bull about 2 miles from camp. And the one thing that I would say is like we most of the time um we kind of we did kind of in my opinion could have done a little better on this. We would go out 2 miles and when we wouldn't find anything, we'd go back to camp and eat lunch and go back, like take a nap and then go back out in the evening, like a deer
Yeah.
hunt.
Yeah.
And that was probably the wrong move. We got on this bull that was just like, he sounded pretty hot, but he was bedded and he was
Hmm.
just bugling from his bed. And initially we had got him to work up this ridge to us and he was coming, but then I think got to like midday and he knew he was close to the trail and he's like, I'm just going to bed down and wait. And so we probably got him to close about 100 yards, and he ended up betting probably about 100 yards from us. We had started hitting him at like 200. And he stopped bugling. So we're like, uh, yeah, we'll just go back for lunch. And like
Yeah.
that was kind of a wrong move because he ended up being there in the evening still. But he wouldn't come in then. And I think what ended up happening is he was bedded there. And by the time we got back out there for the evening, he came across that trail later and went on the
Hmm.
other side. And had we just stayed, camped out, had lunch, just waited him out, we probably would have gotten a shot on that road because I was up higher than the dock, and he was like raking a tree, and the elk was going wild, and he's like, yeah, it's like he's not bugle anymore. We'll go back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
probably something to think about when you learn about elk is like, just wait them out. They'll be there.
Yeah.
It's like a turkey, man. If you call, that's where they're similar, is if you put a trail camera, you call a turkey, and that thing's gobbling and gobbling, 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 and it won't come in, and you put a trail camera there and you leave, that turkey will walk past that trail camera at some point that day, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like something you learn while you're there, but ended up towards the end of the week, the elk started to like, we hit them pretty hard. So they were kind of like just kind of getting further and further from the camp. But it was a pretty great hunt.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, do you know how many people were there in previous weeks doing the same thing that you were doing? Like, how did you know that this was going to be a good spot, or if the outfitter burnt it out already, or did they talk to you about that at all?
Yeah. So the agent that works with the doctor that I went with, knew the guide pretty well and had good reputation with this guide. And so we knew that they took out two groups for the first week of September for archery, and then they took out two groups for the muzzleloader season. However, they had, I think, 8 base camps set up, and they were all pretty far apart from each other. So, like, they'd be like, well, we rotate. So, like, this area, which was like, for the archery, was like 10 miles the other direction.
Yeah.
And then, like, muzzleloader was actually pretty close to the trailhead. Um, So as far as like where we were, the elk weren't really pressured very much. Obviously, it's public land.
Yeah.
Anybody could have hiked in there that I didn't know about. But as far as the guide goes, like, they had a good idea of the pressure that they had put on the elk, and they were pretty selective
Gotcha.
on that. So pretty good service.
Yeah. That's awesome. Because you hear those horror stories about whether it's, I mean, even in Iowa, like guy, I came to Iowa and, the third week in November, and I think the guy had 100 guys in there before me, or, I don't know it. You
Yeah.
don't really know.
Yeah. It kind of makes you nervous. The one guy that I was with, he had done a pig hunt like the year before, and all excited about this pig hunt in Carolina or whatever. And, we're going on this pig hunt. They had booked it. It was supposed to be just them. And they accidentally double booked the cabin, and there was 25 dudes there in, in a cabin with one bathroom,
Oh my God.
and nobody saw a pig. So yeah, like, choosing a guide is not, references and testimonies probably go a long way.
Yeah.
And probably not just by looking at the guide's testimonial
Yeah.
thing on their webpage, like probably actually hearing from somebody else that
Yeah.
has used them.
Yeah. Um, so has that been your only Western hunt so far?
Yeah, I've actually, like, I'm saving up the antelope points. I'm planning to go to Idaho for bears and wolves in next summer.
Okay.
But
All right.
honestly, yeah, that's been it as far as Western hunting goes. But that's what I'm saying is, when you kind of take off some of the learning curve when you use that outfitting, and you do give yourself a better chance of learning. Because, like, this guide, because it's a good one, put me where there was elk. Now I
Mhm.
get to learn about elk
Yeah.
beyond reading about what they might be like or seeing them on a YouTube video, right? Had I done a public land DIY over the counter thing, I might not even find elk for 3-4 years.
Right.
And then I'm kind of missing the learning curve of that, because once you learn how to find elk, if you go do that DIY hunt, you
Mhm.
could kind of go there and be like, this ain't it. This
Yeah.
is not what I want to see. And learn that from one experience, because you learn a lot in a week because you're there to hunt.
Right.
So that's kind of where I would go from that. But yeah, I wouldn't proclaim to be a Western hunter, but I learned a whole lot on that one single hunt, and man, it's pretty cool. I think the thing that you do have to have, like, even if you do the DIY, like, you gotta save some cash to go do those things, and That's one of the big things is like I don't have I can't take off 2 weeks every year like I can take a lot of vacation time. I get six
Yeah.
weeks of vacation time, but it's not like a thing that I can take off like 2 weeks and go drive out there every single year to do it, or have the
Yeah.
cash to do that either.
Yeah. Do you feel that, in a lot of these conversations, so some people would say, "Oh, money doesn't mean success." But do you think when it comes to an Eastern guy traveling west for a new species in a different environment, that the more money you spend on a hunt would you could buy a better opportunity? Because obviously
Um,
you got to make the shot yet, but still, do you think that actually does flatten the curve?
y- uh, y- I think in my experience, yes. I don't think you need to get a fully guided elk hunt to kill an elk. But if you think about it this way, I, uh, if you subtract gear and food, because those are
Mhm.
the things that you need for every hunt, right?
Yep.
Um, the elk tag is like $800, and to drive out there with three guys, you're probably $400 a piece for fuel. And then you know, the hunt itself costs like 2 grand a piece for the guide service, right? So all in all, without gear and without food, I was probably 3 grand into paying for this, right?
Yeah.
If you do that math, for a DIY public land hunt, and you take three guys, the same scenario, it probably cost you about $2,000,
Yeah.
right? Because you're talking about um, expensive fuel and tag and things that you need while you're there. And that's really kind of minus any gear that you've acquired or food, really, right?
Yeah.
So I spent an extra $1,000 to learn something. Um, and I still got to have, because I didn't want a guide. I don't want a guide to be like, find me the animal so I can kill the animal.
Right.
Like, it's not that it's not hunting, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
And because I want to do it on my, like, I want to kill the animal on my own. It's
Mhm.
like when you take a fishing charter and they like tie your hooks on for you, bait them and cast them out, and you just reel it in. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I do that for my kid, but like
Yeah.
that's not for me.
Yeah.
So, um, and if that's what you like, then whatever. But I wanted that, like, still that DIY kind of public land experience, because I wanted the experience just as much as I wanted to kill the elk. But
Right.
if you are hoping to be successful, yeah, I think that the extra cash probably, I don't know what the percentage is. It's like 7 to 10% that somebody kills an elk when they go out west from the east or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
the percentage is very low. But I think my chances of killing something because of what I did were bumped up to about 25%. And I
Mhm.
think
That's a good bump.
that's a pretty good bump when you're talking about bow hunting.
Yeah. 20% bump roughly,
Yeah.
you know?
So I think that, yeah, I do think that if you spend a little bit more, you could find something. And again, kind of like, if you're going to spend money, look for the experience that you still want.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go there, pay all this money for a guide and be like, that was cool, but it wasn't what I wanted. It was not everything that I wanted.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go to do this bear hunt. And honestly, like, I like black bears. I think it's cool to shoot them or whatever. I don't really care if I shoot a bear. I'm definitely going for the experience and the learning part. Like, do I want to bring one home? Yeah, I really
Yeah.
do. But I do want that experience. I'm going to have some people that are going to help me, kind of hone down areas. I have a buddy that's already been to the area that we're going to.
Yeah.
Um, I have the I have a buddy that's going with us that is we're gonna gun hunt, obviously, and he's been like, this guy does everything at a very high level, and I should actually give you his information. He'd be a really good guest. But he used to shoot 3 gun, and he's like, I want to shoot a wolf at 600 yards. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, those kind of things are important, like pieces of what you want for when you go west.
Okay. Awesome, dude. Well, a lot of insight there. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward in the next couple years to cashing in my my elk preference points. I'm not sure what I want to do yet. I still have a lot of thought that needs to go into the actual, like, am I going to go do a drop camp? Am I going to do an outfitter? Um, am I going to do a guide? You know, like,
Mhm.
what's the story there? Am I going to try to get someone else to help me?
Mhm.
Am I going to potentially, I even thought about this. Um, I am going to have a lot of preference points, and I
Yeah.
would be willing to apply as a group with another guy who's
Mhm.
more knowledgeable, who maybe just burnt a couple years ago
Mhm.
his preference points, but has
Mhm.
knowledge of the terrain, and
Mhm.
that I would use my surplus to get into a unit where this guy has knowledge and
Yeah.
basically go in there with that person. Maybe
Yeah.
that would be too risky. I don't know, but that's those are some of the things that I've been thinking about for Wyoming, my Wyoming preference points, or whether or not I'm going to do a lottery like New Mexico or something like that at some
Yeah.
point. So, um, but I got to pull the trigger on it at some point, or I'm just going to be a preference point collector if I don't. So
Yep. Yep.
that's what I'm looking forward to. But Aaron, dude, really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this. Thank you very much. And this is probably going to be this is probably going to be launched on multiple platforms because we went in some weird directions on
Yep.
this episode. But thanks, man, and good luck this upcoming season.
Anytime, buddy. Thanks.